Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Now we're going out to the far southwest kind of side of Mazar-i-Sharif. We're being careful though not to go too far west because we don't want to end up in Balkh. The Balkh province is seized by the Taliban, so the Taliban own that city, so we're trying to stay away from there. But we're going a little bit, maybe 2 or 3 miles away from there to an old Russian like settlement or village. So as I said before, that Afghanistan always seems to be like the land that's impenetrable by every force. When the USSR came in, and this, like the Soviets, the Russians, this is about as far as they made it, just into the north part of Afghanistan. So we're going to their settlement to go kind of see what it looks like now. But we also picked up a friend. He speaks a little bit of English even. What's your name?
My name is Ashmatullah.
Ashmatullah. Perfect. They're hard for me to pronounce, but let's go see what we can find. Government forces, right? The police have no problem being filmed, but there's a lot of certain other people that do not like to be filmed. So this is like one of the ancient gates to Mazar-i-Sharif, right? Very natural borders, right? It's very interesting. Very flowing river. Anyway, so this is what we're heading up into. The city of Balkh is like maybe 2 miles or so that way. But I think we're okay down by the river. I can't think of a better place for us to drink some of our special Uzbek water. Special Uzbek water, which is water.
Water.
Vada. Uzbek water, which is vodka. Technique for this?
Yeah.
We call this a tin cup chalice in the United States. So you go like this. I screwed it up. Should be good enough to drink from. Let's put in a little bit of our Monster.
Oh yes. What is this?
Cut that. It's a really fascinating like natural border for Mazar-i-Sharif, but we're gonna keep going farther inland. Davai, yalla.
Come on.
So they say it's no problem to film the Afghan forces, so let's put this to the test. We didn't get shot, it's all okay. We're changing our mind. Going towards Balkh. Okay, so now we're in kind of an interesting little area. So like I said, this is the Soviet designed area, or the Russian designed, and you can tell it's yes, it's still Afghani, but it has a little like sprinkle of Russian in it, because like the roads are very much nicer. The curbs are different. They have nice bus stops. They have a good school. They have a football pitch. They have everything. Even nice gardens here. But I figured, you know, right now the area that we're in, this is still Afghan government controlled. Really not too far away. I think that way is towards Balkh, but still not too far away. This is just a tiny little last little part of the safe zone. But I figured it'd be an interesting time to tell you. I figured it'd be an interesting time to talk real quickly about like how and why the Taliban formed. And just, like, in a very nice school. While we're in this Russian village, it'd be a good time to really give a quick version of how and why the Taliban formed. Not only are they far away, but also the Russians have a big part of this history. The way that the Russians took it, as opposed to the Americans, took a vastly different approach. So there was always some kind of extremist groups. Afghanistan, as we know, was like the place that could never be conquered. But the Americans couldn't do it, and so when the Soviets tried to do it, at the very end of the Soviet period, it all kind of goes back to Mikhail Gorbachev. So a lot of people know Mikhail Gorbachev is like, you know, when Ronald Reagan went to Berlin to go tell them, you know, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall, and he more or less kind of agreed with it. There's a complicated history behind it, but they kind of agreed with it, and he led to a big hand in the fall of the USSR. But in one of these like last ditch efforts, one of the last wars that he was trying to fight was trying to conquer Afghanistan. And historically, the Afghani people have always held on to like the northeast region up in the mountains. Also, this is a little stretch of the mountain range, and so they've always held on to that pretty strongly. And so Gorbachev knew that was, you know, since they always go up into there, that's the area that he needs to attack most. They couldn't take tanks up there, and they even if they dropped bombs, they were just dropping bombs just completely by guess. Here's a big Russian memorial, but they're just dropping bombs by guess, and so they had to find a different approach. And so the approach that they decided to take, I'll get out here. The approach then that the Russians tried to take, like I said, was a very vastly different approach. So they knew that all these people, these fighters, Afghan fighters, yes, they were poor, they couldn't really afford a ton, and so while they were fighting, they were protecting their homeland, but when they weren't fighting, they needed to protect their family and feed their family. And so a lot of those Afghan fighters at that time were farmers. So they'd go hide up in the mountains, they'd fight from the mountains, but they'd come back down into the valley where they'd do all their farming. They'd have all their kids would go to school, they'd have all their livestock, everything. And so Gorbachev took the brilliant idea to attack that area, to attack them at their home rather than at their fighting place. And so instead of bombing mountains, guessing where to drop bombs in mountains, instead they started bombing things like schools. They started bombing farm fields, pastures, everything. It led to a huge problem, like a huge refugee problem. So all of those, the fighters, the men, like traditionally in their culture, the men always stick along to fight. And so the men stayed there to keep fighting, but the women and the children, knowing that it was unsafe, literally their house and their schools were being bombed. So a lot of them left as refugees to their neighboring countries. A lot of them went to Pakistan. Those are important kids to remember, the kids that fled to Pakistan. But anyway, so then the men stayed, and the men turned into like hardcore like guerrilla fighters, or like, I mean, it was no longer so much like a battle of pride, but now it was like a battle of like survival, that they needed to protect their homeland. And those men then became like super, I don't want to say extremist, but it's essentially what it was. Without their family, without their wives, without anything, they just became kind of like shells of men, and they're just fighters. They stopped becoming family people. They hadn't talked to their family for years. Anyway, so then they kept to the fight, and they're the ones that turned it into the modern day Taliban. The Taliban has, just like any other terrorist organization, has evolved over the years. But it's evolved now in such a way that, like I said, those women and those children that fled to Pakistan, imagine if you were one of those kids where your father's back in Afghanistan and he's still fighting for literally like your land, the land that's been in your family for thousands of years. And so then of course, then they want to protect their land as well. So those Pakistani kids, once they were old enough, then they all came back to Afghanistan, and them, you know, if their parents, you know, weren't extreme fighters, then those kids definitely were. And they're kind of the ones that turned into the modern day Taliban. And the Taliban, just like I said, has evolved, and so they've changed their tactics, they've changed the ways that they recruit, they've changed their values, or like the values to target more people. But right now, a modern day estimate is that there's something like 100,000 or so. Hi. Modern day estimate is that there's about 100,000 or so in Afghanistan. Anyway, so that's what leads us here. Then this little Russian enclave, a great place to talk about the history of the Taliban. All right, one last little swing. Woo! Before we leave the Russian village. It's funny being surrounded by all these You see all the Chinese flags? But despite all the Chinese flags, yet there's no China aid here. No China aid, unlike all of Africa. They just make Chinese flags, that's it. Jola? Shubham, am I supposed to jump off of this? I think it's a little bit too dangerous. It's like this big chair. I feel like I'm totally gonna get hit in the head with it on the way off. Okay, we're gonna try for the dismount. Here we go. Ready?